at this brilliant, fantastic Biotech Gate digital conference. I feel like it is a conference because I'm getting that desire to quickly go to the bar. It really is a digital conference, and it's a great
whiskey sitting on the bar over there.
Oh, get away!
Oh, Rube.
It's a real pleasure to see you all here again. And for those of you who are new, and I think there's a couple of new people, so it's worth saying it. Coffee Buddies is the pop-up event, building a community, and our goal is to entertain, engage, and inform. And maybe people could put their mute everyone, because I think we're getting a bit of background, Graham. But our goal was, when we met Patrick Frey, who's the inventor of Biotech Gate, was to what our goal was to try and bring in to the virtual conference some way of having a coffee group who got together and meet like a coffee group does, and meet around a table. One people spoke, move around, and that's our inspiration. And in particular, to try and bring together the idea that synchronicity and serendipity almost always works for us, because we find the best clients in a random way, actually. Or no matter what database we use, it's always that person you met in a way you can't predict. So that's what Coffee Buddies is all about, and we're very delighted today to have our friend Simon and Julie as well down there. Where's Julie on my screen? And Julie from Simbec Orion, who I've known that company from its beginnings, which was about 1993, and I've watched it with interest over the years grow and become something interesting. And it was a great opportunity to bring Julie and Simon to talk to us all and give us some of the insights. And Simon is going to drive just a few slides. And maybe, Simon, you could start by just telling us who you are and what you do.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Tony, for the opportunity to speak with you. And it's a pleasure to meet everyone. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I think it's the appropriate salutation because we're all across the globe. But yeah, a little bit about myself.
Sorry, I've got to interrupt there. You're just sounding like the Truman Show there for a second. Is that where you got it from? But sorry, carry on, Simon.
Yeah, so just a very brief introduction from myself. I'm a pharmacologist by background. I started off kind of in the lab looking at test tubes. Then I moved to in vitro tissue assays. Then I did my PhD in vivo preclinical models. And I got to my the sort of postdoc stage in my mid-20s. And I thought, well, the next logical progression, instead of just staring down a microscope for 12 plus hours a day, would be to move into human clinical trials. So in 2008, I joined the company Simbec Orion, and I work in their phase 1 unit, which is based in Wales in the UK. And what Julie and I will do today is just give you a little snapshot into what we do, how we do it, why we think we're a little bit different from some others in our area, and then obviously a sort of relevant topic for everyone at the moment is how we do our early phase research in a pandemic and sort of insights into that.
Fantastic. Thanks, Simon.
Julie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I don't compare to my colleague Simon in terms of expertise. I'm actually a statistician by training. But a lot of people don't actually believe that. But really, I moved quite early on into the business development role, mainly across the big CROs. So I've worked at IQVIA for quite a few years, Syneos Health, and Synexus, which was a bit different as a SMO. Organization. And then I recently was attracted by Simbec Orion just being a bit more, I want to use the word boutique in its approach, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So I've just been here just under a year now and supporting Simon and the rest of my colleagues in developing business. So it's great to have this chance to network as well, because obviously being in business development, that's a challenging part at the moment with the COVID lockdown. So it's great to meet you all.
So fantastic. So next slide, please.
Sure. So I'm certainly one, you know, I give a fair amount of presentations as part of my work, and I do like to keep things relatively simple. So in a nutshell, this is how I would describe us and how we do what we do. One of the things that gets me excited and gets me out of bed every day in relation to the work that I do is we don't just run clinical trials on behalf of biotech and pharma companies. If we did, you know, there's a role for that and we need to do it, but it's much more about engaging and talking strategy with a whole variety of different organizations that are developing medicinal products and trying to get them to the market. Our organization, as Julie mentioned, you know, we cover from first in human right through to sort of phase 3 and regulatory, you know, marketing authorization submissions. My particular role, I'm based very much in the early phase part, and I consider my sort of specialty is that translation step from animal studies into first in human, and then also your other sort of phase 1 PK PD type studies. But that's what I really enjoy out of my job, is speaking to lots of different companies. And we were talking when Tony Graham and Julie and I were speaking before, you know, we conduct from our phase 1 unit approximately 30 or so studies per year, but out of, you know, on top of that, we're probably having discussions with 90 to 100 different organizations at different stages in development. I really enjoy speaking to the smaller organizations, because typically they're the ones who need that little bit of advice, and they really benefit from our, you know, collective experience. And just to correct you, Tony, we're a little bit older actually than 1993. We actually started doing our first clinical trials in the early 80s. So we've been around the block, not personally myself, for quite that long, but yeah, we've sort of seen a lot in the last 40 years of clinical trials. As Julie mentioned, we consider ourselves a boutique CRO when we're not, you know, the very large CROs that Julie mentioned she's had previous experience working with, and I think we like to think that we're the right size for our clients. We're big enough that we can offer a full service. We've got labs, we've got IMP management, PV, data management. We don't need to outsource anything. So when we have our clients come to us, we can do a full service. But we are still small enough, you know, our organizational structure is pretty flat. I know that's a sort of bit of a, you know, every organization likes to claim that, but you know, I can pick up the phone to our CEO, our clients can get through to our CEO, you know, very, very, very quickly. And the one thing that I really enjoy, and I've come to realize, as our industry and as early phase clinical development has evolved over the last 12 years I've been involved in it, most regulators, particularly the MHRA and the FDA, have tried to, you know, they've embraced being more flexible. The MHRA in particular had quite a bad reputation, or a conservative reputation, I'd say, when I first joined the industry back in 2008, and there's been a real development there. We as an organization have been able to really benefit from that. So we're small enough that we can make quite, you know, rapid decisions as we see evolving data, evolving information. And this could be right at the, you know, at the start of the, you know, just even conceiving the trial design, helping our client, you know, paint that picture what that first in human study looks like, right through to, as we'll come on to later, you know, we've got a first in human study open, and then a global pandemic hits in February, March. How do we handle it? So I'll speak a little bit about that later, but it's certainly, yep. Sure.
A couple of questions, Simon. I mean,
of course,
boutique is it's a very interesting word, and I really get it. And it really, for me, it conjured up a message of strong relationships. Is that what you think of it as that sort of way?
Absolutely, and it's recognizing that, you know, every clinical trial particularly the first in human ones are different, and we can be approached by two different clients who are developing a product that works via the same mechanism of action, same indication, and the two trials could be totally different, and that's one of the things that I enjoy about it. And you're absolutely right, it's about that bespoke service. And again, to sort of expand the comparison with, say, our larger competitors in the space like IQVIA. If we had a client come to us and say, we need you to do a 12,000 patient cardiovascular endpoint study, phase 3 study, we would probably say, we're not the right organization for you. One of the things I didn't mention again is we have experience in a number of therapeutic indications, but by no means all therapeutic indications. We specialize in a handful, particularly in oncology, rare and orphan, and pediatrics. Of course, from the first in human phase 1 aspect, the indications tend to be less relevant. We do far more, a wider range of indications from a first in human point of view, but from a phase 2, phase 3. Yeah.
And if you, I mean, I've watched the growth of CROs from doctors who did it as a part of their private practice all the way along. Now, the word strategic, I mean, how, Simon, do you see the landscape? How's pharma thinking about CROs today? Do you get a sense, or biotechs? How are they thinking about?
Yeah, and so first of all, we're still seeing this emerging picture from the COVID situation and how that's affecting our clients and farmers' view on the CRO mix and where they do, not just the geographic location for their studies, but which CROs. I remember when I first joined the industry, it was quite common for the large pharma to have preferred provider status just with one large CRO. I certainly feel now that most companies are spreading their risk a little bit and not putting all their eggs in one basket. And certainly I'd say some of our most successful relationships with biotechs are with companies that do have a spread, and they don't do all their work with us. They do a big chunk of their work with us, but then they also work with other clients. So it's all about the right organization for that study, the right country, and every clinical trial is different. So I think the older strategy is being pursued less.
I mean, one of the things I was always interested was having a dashboard on a CRO. So it's like, so I could see what they were doing, because it was a bit like you wanted to understand what your collaboration was doing for you. Do you provide lots of metrics to customers?
Yes, that's something that certainly has evolved from a clinical trial management software as a tool. We're now able to, particularly for the sort of phase 2, phase 3 studies, we're able to absolutely sort of integrate that data into a dashboard type display, so they have a feel for the status of their study, the status of different sites, times to approvals, the time for setup, and then time from sort of last patient, last visit to closing up that site, query resolution, these types of things.
And the last word before you move on is agility or agile. I mean, maybe you could just give a bit of color to what you call agile.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's certainly applicable to a couple of different aspects of what we do. If you'd have asked me this question, in January or December last year, then I would have focused mainly on the fact that because a large chunk of our client base are smaller biotechs, and we are talking from, we work with a number of university spin-out biotech, those types of things, where the company might be 2 or 3 people and everything else is outsourced. We find that the plans that those companies have with regards to their their investigational medicinal product manufacture, that they'll have a project timeline in front of them, and we will always anticipate that that's going to shift, that's going to change. When we compare that with working with large pharma, when large pharma say that, you know, their preclinical studies are going to be done on this date, their investigational drug is going to be ready on this date, you can pretty much guarantee that's going to be the case, because they have the resource and the capacity to deliver on things. So I would say that we need less agility is required less when working with large pharma, because we have such a large sort of small client base. Then we do have to roll with the punches, and you know, the things change daily basis, so certainly on a weekly basis. And when we develop timelines and sort of projections for a study, we always know that we need to allow slack in the system and sufficient flexibility, that when we get that last minute call on a Friday at 4 p.m. to say your drug's not going to be on site on the Monday, we can handle that, and it doesn't cause sort of horrendous delays. We are able to accommodate it.
Yeah, fantastic. Maybe you'd move on to your next slide.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so this is the last I wanted to say about us as an organization in general before I move on to sort of more study related things. But just to give you an idea of our global footprint, the darker blue areas and countries represent those countries where we conduct research. Some of those countries we actually have offices, the UK, France. Our headquarters is in Cardiff, in Wales in the UK, but we also have an office in Paris. But the other countries are where we have either project managers or contract research associates, clinical research associates, CRAs, those boots on the ground that are visiting the sites and conducting all those sort of phase 2, phase 3, multi-center, multinational trials. You'll see the breakdown, as I mentioned on the previous slide, about our types of customer, and it's about half of our clients are biotech and mid-cap pharma. You'll see the top left. Yeah, we've done thousands of early phase studies over the last 40 years.
Excellent.
Okay, so moving on then to how we've had to adapt from COVID. So certainly I know for some countries, COVID kind of that wave hit a little bit earlier. In the UK, it was really in February where we thought, right, okay, this is happening, this is real. We need to set up this internal task force. Then move on to March. That's when we realized things were progressing in the UK, that it was appropriate then to put new clinical trial activity on hold. And what I mean by that is that we paused in enrolling new participants onto our studies. We paused starting actually dosing new cohorts, things like that. We still had an obligation to follow up existing patients and participants that were on our trials, but we really didn't think it was appropriate to sort of start new activity. Then in that period between April and May, there was a lot of sort of risk assessment mitigations, as there have been for all companies and all industries. But specific to us was, some pretty substantial facilities adaptations. In the photograph on the right, you'll see that's one of our clinical pharmacology wards. And as with many businesses these days, we have these large perspex screens that are in between as that additional risk mitigation for the potential spread should we have any COVID cases. We minimize that risk of having COVID cases through the standard social distancing, improving our PPE, temperature screening for all participants and staff on entry, obviously needing a procedure for handling any suspected cases. And one of the things I didn't mention that we're particularly proud of is that we actually have, unlike many other CROs and phase 1 units, we have on-site in building a central laboratory that has bioanalytical capabilities, safety and pathology, assay capabilities, and very quickly then we were able to establish the COVID-19, both the antigen and the antibody assay, so we can perform that testing in-house. So all of those activities meant that we, together with the emerging epidemiological sort of environment in the UK, we restarted our trial activities in mid-June. And in parallel with that, you know, going back to sort of March, probably not a surprise, you know, I mean, everyone's heard in the news how many vaccine studies, how many other COVID-related, you know, research has been going on. We saw real high activity in terms of number of opportunities, and approximately 5 of those have kind of crystallized into real active projects at various stages. 2 of those are vaccines, and 3 are repurposed drugs for treatments of things such as, you know, the acute respiratory distress syndrome associated with COVID, and other sort of direct treatments as opposed to vaccines. What we found quite interesting, and Julie and I have sort of pondered over why this might be, and it's, you know, it's just speculation at this point, but we saw a lot of increased activity and non-COVID opportunities. So we were getting, you know, bombarded with biotech and pharma saying, we want to do this clinical trial. Can you help? Can you give us a budget for this? How soon can you do it? Could we get this in the clinic before the end of the year? So obviously from our point of view, that was positive. There was that kind of initial period immediately post-COVID where everyone kind of drew in a breath. But we actually saw, yeah, we've seen sort of this increased activity in R&D, in early phase research in our industry. So I say this very hesitantly, but currently we are back to pre-COVID activity as far as our early phase clinical research goes. Obviously, we're monitoring the situation daily. I know, I'm sure in all of your countries, there's you know, daily reports of spikes and increases in infection. So it's something we're monitoring very, very closely. We're a lot better equipped to handle any real significant second wave or spike in the UK if and when that happens. But for now, you know, we're very pleased to be back to generally where we were before the pandemic hit.
Great.
Fantastic.
I think if we you know, wrap up in the next minute or 2, and then we can start the breakouts.
So Simon, just a big thanks to Simon. That was
no problem.
and Julie, as it's in support, it was super.